Well, hello, class. So we'll start by going over some questions some students wanted me to go over. So we'll look at page 317 first. So here's 6D. Okay, so um, right off the bat, you've got two of the same uh, bracket A plus 2, so you can cancel those out. So remember, if you have the same thing on the top and the bottom, it can be canceled out. Now here, this is where I think the confusion was. So right now, these two are different. Okay, but what you can do is you can factor out a -1 for the bottom or for the top. Either way, it doesn't matter. So we factored out a negative from the top. So that's why this is -5. So this becomes -a plus 3. Okay, so -a plus 3, that's the same thing as 3 minus a. Okay, so that's the same thing. And so therefore these two can cancel out. And then you got -5/10, which is going to be -1/2. Okay, so even though you don't have a variable at the bottom, uh, you look at the ones that you canceled out, and that's where the non-permissible values come from. Okay, so this type of thing where they're different, you can factor something out of one of them to make it the same as the other. Okay, this one here. So what you got to do is factor. Okay, so you factor the top, you get b minus 4, b plus 6. You can factor a 2 right off the bat for the bottom part. And now what you have in brackets is a difference of squares. Okay, so remember, difference of squares, that's going to be a b minus 6 and b plus 6. So the two b plus 6's cancel out, and then you're left with this. Okay, b minus 4 over 2b minus 6. Okay, so b can't equal 6 and -6. Okay, 8D. So same thing here. Let's factor. So we can make these easier by finding something common. So the top you can pull out a 5. The bottom you can pull out a 10. So you get these quadratics. And now you can factor each of those. And so you've got a 2k plus 5, which is the same for these. And then you got the 5/2. So that's just going to reduce to 1/2. So k plus 3, k minus 3. And so 3 for this one, and then -5/2 for the one you canceled out. Okay. 8f. So this one looks a little bit different. Notice at the top it's still a difference of squares. Okay, so that goes to x minus y, x plus y. On the bottom there, if you factor that out, that's going to be x minus y, x minus y. And so you're left with that. So x can't equal y. Okay, so if these are the same, then that becomes 0. So remember, a non-permissible value is anything that makes the bottom of the fraction become 0. Okay, next page here, 327. So this was on the second section. So now what we're doing is we're multiplying. Okay, so remember we talked about if it's the same on the top and the same on the bottom of one fraction, you can cancel out. But same thing, if it's the same thing on the top of one fraction and the bottom of the other fraction, that can also be canceled out. Okay, so the first thing we want to do, both of these are difference of squares. So you get a minus 1, a plus 1, a minus 3, a plus 3. So the a plus 3 on the second fraction on the bottom cancels out with the a plus 3 on the top of the first fraction. Okay, and the a plus 1 from the bottom of the first cancels out with the a plus 1 on the top of the second. Okay, and so everything else remains. So you get a minus 1, a minus 3, and then a can't equal any of these values. Okay, so again, even though something doesn't remain in the final answer, if it existed in any of the previous steps as being on the bottom, it has to be included for the non-permissible values. Okay, next one here. So you've got a division. So remember, if it's a division, what we have to do is we have to multiply by the reciprocal. So the reciprocal, again, is this thing being flipped around. Okay, so that's going to give you, so we factor, okay, and then this one here, the 2w plus 3 is now at the bottom. and the w plus 2 is now on the top. And then when you factor this one, you've got a w plus 2 that cancels that out, 2w plus 3 which cancels that out. Okay, and so you're left with w minus 2 over 3. Now, if you look at your non-permissible values, the negative 2 is here, and the negative 3 over 2 is here. But this negative 2 also includes this one here, because this originally was at the bottom. Okay, so you have to include this even though it becomes flipped around. Okay, so you still have to add in the restriction for that one. Okay, 8c. So same idea, we got to factor this all out. This thing here is going to be flipped around. So you get 3x minus 1, 3x plus 1 over x plus 5, and you've got 2 minus x. So this was the bottom here, it's on the top now, and this is factored into this part here. Okay, and then you can cancel what I did here again is x minus 2, I took out a negative 1, so I made it negative x plus 2, which is the same as 2 minus x. Okay, so because you can just put that as 2 minus x here, right? So these two cancel out, and you're left with that there. So that negative 1, you can just put that on the top, or you could put it on the bottom. It doesn't matter where that goes. And then the restrictions, so negative 5 is for this one, 2 is for this one, and the negative 1/3 is for that one. Okay, and the last one here. So this is a long one. But you're still doing the same thing. So anywhere there's a division, that means those ones have to be flipped over. Okay, so again, that's the reciprocal. And so now factor it all out. Okay, so we got a 2y plus 1, 2y plus 1, y minus 1, y minus 1, y plus 1, and y plus 1. So everything else is there. And then again, another one of these things where these two can become the same if you pull out a negative 1. And so that negative I just put over here. So that's a negative 2 over y minus 2. And then a whole bunch of restrictions here from all the bottom of the fractions. Okay, including the ones that were originally like this. So the 2y minus 2 and the y plus 1. Okay, so you have to identify those ones as well. Okay, so the next topic we'll look at is the adding and subtracting of rational expressions. Okay, so here we looked at multiplying and dividing. Okay, so just continue with the notes here. So what has to happen here is, in order to add and subtract, the denominators must be the same. Okay, so that's the key point. So like, for example, if I've got 1/2 plus 1/3, okay, so I can't add those the way it is. So I have to have a common denominator between 2 and 3, which would be 6. So that means I have to multiply this one by 3 over 3, this one by 2 over 2. So this becomes 3 over 6 plus 2 over 6, which becomes 5 over 6. Okay, so you have to have a common denominator when you add and subtract fractions. So it's no different here. So this one is already common, it's got n. Now what you have to be careful of is this minus here is for m plus 1. So you have to be careful with the signs. So one way to do that is so now we've got it all over n. It's a common denominator. So it's m minus, and then I just put this in brackets, m plus 1. And then what you can do is the minus turns the m into minus m, and it turns the 1 into negative 1. Okay, and then the m minus m becomes 0, and so you get negative 1 over n, and the non-permissible value is n cannot be equal to 0. Okay, next one here, same idea. Okay, so the denominator is already common, 4m minus 3. So same idea, it's a subtraction, so I put a minus, and then I put the 8 minus 2m in brackets. And so it's 10m minus 1, and then minus 8 plus 2m because it's a negative negative. Okay, so this part here where I put the brackets around what's being subtracted is really important because a lot of times what students do is they'll figure out that it's minus 8, but they'll leave this as negative 2m, okay, and not seeing that the two minuses here end up multiplying. So it's essentially what you're doing here is you're multiplying the whole thing by minus 1. Okay, so that's important. And so you got 10m and 2m, so that becomes 12m, and then negative 1, negative 8 becomes negative 9. You can factor out a 3 here, and so you get 4m minus 3, 4m minus 3. So your answer is just 3, and then your restriction is 3 over 4, right? Because m can't be 3 over 4, because then you're going to get 0 at the bottom. Okay, next one here. So this one, again, they're already the same. You can put it all together. And then here you've got a positive, so I don't need to put this in brackets. And here I've only got one thing, so it's negative 8. And then you get this. If I could factor that, I can't factor it, but if I could, I'd factor that and see if I can cancel anything out. Okay, now what do you do if the bottoms are different? Okay, so those are the more complicated ones. Okay, so let's start with this one here. Okay, so now it's not like the first set of examples. So these are different. P squared minus 1, p plus 1. There is a difference of squares. So I'll factor that. So now I've got 4 over p minus 1, p plus 1, plus 3 over p plus 1. So both of these contain the p plus 1. This one is lacking the p minus 1. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply this one by p minus 1 over p minus 1. Okay, so it becomes the same as that one there. And so that's what's going on here. Okay, so we're multiplying that. And so now what you get is 4 plus 3 times p minus 1 over the same bottom. And so you get 4 plus, so this is being multiplied here. Okay, so you get 3p minus 3. And then that becomes 3p plus 1, 4 minus 3 over p minus 1, p plus 1. Okay, so that's more difficult, okay, when the denominators are not the same. Okay, next one here. So factor everything. Okay, and so now what you notice is both of these have the x plus 3. This one's got an x minus 2, and this one's got an x plus 1. So what you want to do is, here's your common denominators then. Okay, so you add the one that's lacking. So this one's lacking the x plus 1, and then this one here is lacking the x minus 2. And then if we want to include that, then we have to multiply the top by that as well. Okay, and so now you get this whole thing. And then what you can do is you can expand each of these two sides and put it together, and that gives you the 4x minus 5. Okay, okay, last one here. Now this is a division, but you notice how you have brackets that have subtractions first. Okay, so what you have to do is you have to follow your order of operations and do what's in the brackets first. Okay, so I want to make the 2 so it's over y. So I have to multiply this one by y over y. And then I want this one over y as well, so I have to multiply by y over y. Okay, so that gives you 2y over 2, or sorry, 2y over y. And then this one becomes y squared over y. And so this is going to be 2y minus 4 and y squared minus 4. Okay, and so here you notice we have a difference of squares, and then this can be factored as well. So we factor out a 2 here, so that gives you y minus 2. And then we factor, but we have to flip this around because it's a division, right? So you got to flip this around. Okay, and then it becomes, this y here is on top now. And then you got y minus 2, y plus 2, so that's from the difference of squares. So the y's cancel, the y minus 2 cancels, and so you're left with 2 over y plus 2. Okay, so y can't equal 0 because of this y, okay, and it can equal 2 because of y minus 2, and it can equal negative 2 because of y plus 2. Okay, so the trouble here is trying to find out the common denominator. Okay, so and then making sure that you multiply the top and bottom by both of those. So I'll stop there. So what you can do are these questions here, 1, 5, and 6 from 336. And again, just let me know if any of these you want me to go over for next lesson. So what I'm going to get you to do prior to Thursday's class is work on those questions. And then I've got another take home, this time a quiz, not a test. So you can get that done and then submit that before Thursday's class. I haven't finished marking all the tests yet for the last one. I should have those done by Thursday, and then I'll let you know what your score is. Okay, so I'll get those done soon. My apologies for not having that done tonight. Okay, so I'll stop there. Make sure you just continue communicating with me if there's any questions, and if you're having any difficulties. I'm starting to get a little bit more questions from students, so that's good, but more would be better. And I haven't heard about anybody having any technical difficulties, but if you still are, just let me know about that as well. Okay, so continue to look after yourself, be safe. I feel a little bit more optimistic in terms of the way things are going, but we're not there yet. Okay, so I'll talk to you again on Thursday. Bye now.